Thank you, Dave. Barefoot preachers back in the house. It's good to be back at one of the wonderful spiritual communities that I love to connect with on a regular basis. So it's my joy to be here. I know you all have as a community, been on the journey of sacred abundance, learning the principles for these last 7 weeks, and it's my honor that Reverend Diane invited me to come and close this program out by sharing the 7th principle with you. So there is a story of a monastery that, though at one point was growing and thriving because of persecution in the 18th century and a trend toward more secular ways in the 19th, the interest began to fall away. People no longer wanted to come and visit the grounds as they began to be in disrepair, and the younger monks didn't want to join this particular order. And so it got to the place where there were just 5 monks left in the monastery, the Father Abbot and 4 others, all of them over the age of 80. It was truly a dying order. There was a small little hut in the woods nearby that a local rabbi would come on occasion to spend some time in solitary prayer. And the monks, after their lifetime of prayer, had become quite intuitive. And though they could not see his arrival, they could always know when the rabbi was present. One such time, the abbot decided that perhaps, maybe the rabbi might have some wisdom for him, might have a solution of how to try to save his dying order. So he journeyed into the woods and knocked, and though the two had never met, there was a kinship there. And they sat down over tea, and he explained his difficulty. What do I do? No one wants to join the order. No one wants to visit the grounds. There are no donations coming. How can I reverse this fortune? How can I change this fate? And sadly, the rabbi could not offer any wisdom, for he was in the same predicament. He shared that hardly anyone wanted to come to his synagogue anymore. Everyone seemed to be into more outer things now. And so the two simply sat and prayed together. They wept together. They broke bread and shared their stories. So as it came time to leave, the abbot said, "But I have failed in my intention for coming here. I thought surely you would have advice for me. You would have an answer for me." And the rabbi said, "I do not. I'm sorry, I have no advice. But just these words to leave you with. The Messiah is one of you." So when the abbot returned back to the monastery, the other monks clamored to hear what had the rabbi said. And he explained that he didn't have an advice or a solution because he was in the same predicament, but he said, "He left me with these words, almost cryptic, saying, 'The Messiah is one of you.'" Well, over the ensuing weeks to come, all of the monks pondered, what could these words mean? Could he literally be saying that the Messiah is one of us in the monastery? Well, surely if so, it must be Father Abbot. But I suppose, well, it couldn't be Brother Joseph. Brother Joseph is so scattered and absent-minded. But Brother Joseph did have a way of speaking just the perfect prayer at the perfect time. It certainly would not be Brother William. My goodness, did he have a temper? Couldn't be him. But then, Brother William had a presence about him. He had a way about him where people felt compassion. Surely not Brother Andrew. He didn't know much about the scriptures. But he was actually truly the presence of unconditional love. So perhaps And obviously, it couldn't be me, they would say. But at the thought of the possibility, the monks began to treat each other with a very significant amount of respect and reverence, on the off chance that one of them was indeed the Messiah. And on the off chance that each monk himself could indeed be the Messiah, began each treating themselves with a high level of respect and reverence. Well, there were still a few travelers that on occasion would stop on the grounds to pray or picnic. And it happened that when they did, they could feel this energy of deep honor and love and reverence. It was palpable. It made them want to stay. It made them want to help. And so more and more people would come. People wanted to help make the grounds more beautiful. They wanted to donate to the work that was happening. And some young men on the spiritual path would sit and pray with the monks and talk with them more about their journey and how did they become who they are on this spiritual path. And they wanted to follow that. And so more joined the order. And just a few years later, after the rabbi's sacred gift of those words, the monastery was thriving, growing abundant and prosperous again. The Messiah is one of you. The monks learned the power, the incredible and profound power of the seventh principle of sacred abundance, which I call everyday Namaste. The word Namaste is an ancient Sanskrit word. There are many variations of translation, but in essence, Namaste means the holy part of me honors the holy part of you. The divine in me honors the divine in you. In unity, we often say, the Christ in me beholds the Christ in you. Whatever languaging about that God presence in me sees it in you. And for living this practice, that's why I use the word every day, there are three pieces to this practice. The first part is when I say the divine in me. So the first piece is I must acknowledge that I am indeed a divine being. That's the first piece, is acknowledging the truth of who I am as a child of God, the Christ individualized of God in expression. At our church every Sunday we affirm, I am God's magnificent creation. That's the first piece of Namaste. We cannot practice it if we do not first acknowledge our own holy presence. I am God's magnificent creation. Will you affirm that with me? I am God's magnificent creation. Yeah. The second part is acknowledging and seeing and beholding the divine essence in you. Seeing that every person, every single person that crosses our path in any given moment in our lifetime is God's magnificent creation. Now, is there anybody that you're thinking, really? He is God's magnificent? Yes. Every single person on this planet Earth is God's magnificent creation. So first we understand our own divinity and we see it in others. But just knowing it is not enough. The true essence of everyday Namaste is once I know that I am divine and you are divine, then we need to act in accordance with that information. We need to act like it. What does it mean to treat someone as the divine? When we fully live that, we live from a place of reverence, of honor, of compassion, of respect, of service, of unconditional love. That is what we are called to. You know, Scripture, Jesus refers to this practice. Jesus invites us into this knowing when he says, whatever it is you have done to the least of my brethren, you have done unto me. However you are treating those around you is how you are treating the Christ. That is the practice of Namaste. I heard an amazing story of a professor at a Christian seminary who was fond of using object lessons to make points. And he would tend to try to always check the tone of the students in the room and see what was up for them, and then find an exercise or an activity that could help them work their spiritual principles with that exercise. And there was a particular time when there was a lot of unrest going on. The biblical term, there was murmuring among the Israelites. And he could just tell that generally students were unhappy about all sorts of things. He could just feel anger and frustration and all of this moving through the class. So he decided to work one of his famous lessons. And when the students came in, they found on the wall was a huge target, red and white concentric circles with the bullseye right in the center. And he explained to them, I've noticed there's been some anger up. I've noticed you guys have some things that are frustrating you. So I'm going to give you a chance to work that out today. So he handed out blank pieces of paper and pencils. He said, on this piece of paper, I want you to draw a representation. You know, it can be a symbol, it can be a word, it can be a name, it can be a face of what right now is the target. Who right now, particularly, is the target of your anger? Think about who has frustrated you, who has wronged you, you know, who's on the outs with you right now, and let's just try to clear that anger out. So they all began to scratch and scribble and make their symbols and draw their faces and things, and then he lined them up single file, one at a time, and he would take their picture, put it right in the center of the target, and then that person, he would hand them a dart. And he said, just let her rip. And let them just hurl that anger energy to try to clear it out. You know, and the first few were a little tentative, kind of like, really? But man, once it got to about the fourth or fifth one, they were, take that! And they're screaming, and they're roaring, and they're cheering for each other, and get them, you got it! And they had a great time just releasing all this anger at the people that had done them wrong. And he looked at the clock, noticing there was not much time left, and he had to stop the exercise. There were a few students that didn't get their turn. They were ready to change the picture to his face at that point. And he paused for a moment, and he walked over to the wall, and he reached to the corner, and he peeled the target away. And behind it was a picture of the face of Jesus that was torn and ripped and marred, almost unrecognizable, scarred by all of their anger. And there was a gasp in the room, just like the one there was here just now. And when the bell rang, they all marched out in silence. Point taken. Now, don't you know, in a Christian seminary, if they were looking at the picture of Jesus, do you think even one of those students would have been able to throw that dart? Not in a million years. They would have been literally incapable of doing it because they would be knowingly looking at the face of God. Whatever it is you do to the least of my brethren, you do to me. Whenever we do harm, we are doing harm to the Christ in that person. Whenever we serve and love and lift up, we are serving and loving and lifting up the Christ. Does that make sense? Each one of us is that essence, that divine Christ presence in expression. And our spiritual calling is to see that and know that for every person in our lives, every person we encounter, every person. Yes, the one that cuts you off in traffic, yes. The one that gets in the express lane in Publix with 67 things in their cart, yes. The perpetrators of the most heinous acts of war that are going on right now, yes. because each and every being on this planet is the Christ of God in expression. And our work is to see that and know that, particularly for those people that it's really hard to know that for. Because as we can see it and know it for them, we can support them in knowing the truth for themselves and seeing themselves as God's magnificent creation. And what I found amazing about this practice of everyday namaste is that it builds bridges and it breaks down walls. All of a sudden, when we simply know, I am divine and you are divine and I'm going to act that way, it changes all this illusion of separation. I watched it happen before my eyes a couple of years ago in my travels. I was in Orlando and staying at a hotel that had a huge open atrium in the center of the lobby. And one morning, I heard a lot of activity going on, so I went out to see what was up and was looking over the railing, as I noticed a lot of other folks were. And there was a huge, elaborate Hindu wedding ceremony that was taking place in this lobby. And it was absolutely stunning because the wedding party and all of the guests were dressed in full Indian regalia. And they had their beautiful jewelry and their saris and their gorgeous headdresses. And there were these ceremonies happening, one after the other, these rituals of different parts of the family participating and acknowledging the sacredness of the union. And it was a deeply traditional Hindu ceremony. Just down the railing from me, there was a woman who was wearing a vest. And I acknowledged her and recognized that because I had walked through the lobby and there was a convention going on for the Knights of Columbus. And she was one of the members of that group. Now, the Knights of Columbus, they define themselves as the foremost Catholic organization. So here is a woman who participates and serves and volunteers in the foremost Catholic organization in the world, bearing witness to a traditional Hindu wedding ceremony. And I was curious what might be going on. And at one point I glanced over, and she turned and locked eyes with me, and she had tears. And she said, "My God, isn't it beautiful? Isn't it just beautiful?" Isn't that powerful? See, in that moment, the different religious traditions didn't matter. There was no separation of what God are they worshiping and what God do I worship. It was just simply the presence of the divine as love at work that she could witness and honor. That's Namaste, my friends. That's how it works. And as a practice every day throughout our lives, I invite people to just energize to Namaste silently with the people that you're passing, with the people that are at the other gas pump beside you or in the grocery store, or those people that you're not necessarily going to engage in relationship or connection with. But the practice can happen just silently as you just glance, and in your heart and in your mind, just think, Namaste. I behold the divine in you. And you would be amazed at the energy that creates, even just a momentary silent blessing. And you just simply walk through the world as that energy. Now, when we are around more of our like-minded community, it's easier to be more demonstrative about it. There's a visual way that it is practiced, which is with hands folded in prayer and a small bow. That is a silent gesture of Namaste. So just from your seat, I want you to turn and do that to someone around you, and then turn and do that to someone else around you. Just Namaste. Look and see the presence of God. Yeah. It is a simple teaching, but as I say about all of the principles of sacred abundance, they're all simple, not necessarily easy. And this one is one truly where the rubber meets the road here, of are we going to walk our talk? It's real easy to be all up in the Namaste energy here on a Sunday morning, isn't it? Oh, I see God in you. Mm-hmm. But then how often do we just fall right off of that the minute we get out of the parking lot? The real work is about being able to see and behold the divine in the most contentious people in the world around you. And what is amazing is when we can do that, you will discover that the divine will show up if that's what we start to look for. The presence of God in each and every face. And my very favorite story that I will close with that I've ever heard about this living practice is a story about a little boy who decided that he wanted to meet God. He wanted to find God and meet God and talk to God. And based on what he had been told, it appeared as though he was going to have to go on quite a journey to find God. So he prepared to head out, and he loaded up his backpack with a little sweatshirt and a flashlight, and just in case he had the need for sustenance, he also put in a box of Twinkies and a 6-pack of root beer. Yes, absolutely. I want to travel with this kid, right? So he headed off on his journey, walking joyously and just anticipating that he would surely be able to figure out where God was. And part of his journey took him through a beautiful city park. And his feet were getting a little tired, and he realized he needed a little snack, so he decided to take a little sit down on a park bench. And he sat on one end, and at the other end there was an elderly woman. And when he sat down, they didn't speak, but she turned and smiled at him. And he noticed that she had just a stunningly beautiful smile. So he sat down and opened up his pack, and he pulled out a Twinkie, pulled out a root beer, and started enjoying his snack. And he thought, now she had that really pretty smile. I wonder if I could get her to smile again. So he reached in and pulled out another Twinkie and a root beer and offered them to her. And she didn't disappoint. She responded with another stunning, beautiful smile. And so the two of them sat there for quite some time. They never spoke. They just enjoyed their snacks and the beautiful breeze and the trees, just being present with one another. The little boy looked and saw that the sun was beginning to go down. He knew it would be supper time soon, and his mom would be worried, so he needed to head back home. So he put the rest of his things back in his pack and threw it onto his shoulder and started back, and he only got just a couple of steps when he turned around and ran back and jumped into her arms and gave her a huge hug. And she returned with the most brilliant smile. So when he arrived home, his mom noticed something was up. "What have you been up to today, Joey? You look so light. You look so joyous. What did you do that's made you so happy?" And he said, "Oh, I had lunch in the park with God. And she has the most beautiful smile I've ever seen." And about that same time, the older woman was arriving home. And her son quickly noticed something was up. "Mother, what did you do today? You look lighter than I've seen you in quite some time." And she flashed that smile and said, "Oh, I had Twinkies in the park with God. And he is much younger than I expected." Namaste.